Welcome to the Atheists of Florida YouTube channel. We are pleased to offer some of the most significant speakers and profound issues of our times. If you like today's video, please hit the like button. If you have already subscribed, thank you. If not, you know what to do.
All right, so thanks for having me. I have technical difficulties aside. I have, it's been a year since I've had to do this, but I had to do it every day, during the COVID lockdowns. If you're familiar with what those were, I know your governor opposed them. So this is conspiracy theories, how conspiracy theories draw people in and down. And so we'll just get started. Okay, there we go. All right, so the first issue with conspiracy theories is defining them, right? So what is a quote conspiracy theory, unquote? In our community, in skeptics, atheist communities, we have a general idea of what we are talking about, right? We tend to think of, David Icke's lizard aliens from the constellation Draco are disguising themselves as the Queen, the Pope, or Obama. I don't know if Ike has said that the King Charles. I don't know if he's formally king. I know he's technically king, but I don't know if he's coronated yet. I don't know if he's adapted his theory there, but we think of that, right? We think of the shape-shifting lizard monsters. Bill Gates and George Soros created COVID to inject us with 5G nanobots for, I don't know, whatever reason. Homeopathy and colloidal silver are the real cures for cancer, and chemotherapy contains a substance known as luciferase, so it can usher in the Antichrist. Right. Now we know what those are. Right? We know that these are conspiracy theories because they are clearly and obviously conspiracy theories. But sometimes they're not so obvious. Right? Sometimes conspiracy theory doesn't look like one of those cases, right? And this is important because we need to create definitions of terms so we know what to look for.
Feature of silent dramas about love triangles.
It's much
from 1923.
Okay. It's much like quote pornography in that way, right? It's a famous case where one of the Supreme Court justices said, I couldn't define it, but I know it when I see it. And conspiracy theories are like that, right? Coming up with a definition that covers all cases and excludes the right cases is very difficult. But when you hear someone talking about it, you kind of know, right? A conspiracy theory should be defined precisely so that we know how to treat it, right? So let's some examples of the problem here, right? If I claim that the president used intelligence agents to spy on political opponents, am I claiming a conspiracy theory? Right? I mean, maybe, but I could be talking about, Richard Nixon, right? If I claim that there exists an international organization that has spent a considerable amount of time sex trafficking children and hiding pedophiles, I sound like I'm repeating something that, the QAnon people are talking about, right? And that's, QAnon's clearly a conspiracy theory. But I could be talking about the Vatican, right? I could be talking about the Catholic churches for the last 100 years, right? And maybe you've heard someone mention that the US government ignored a disease because it was killing an inconvenient part of the population. So, who am I talking about? Am I talking about what the current right wing is saying about Democrats and COVID-19, even though it doesn't make sense? Or am I talking about like Reagan and the HIV crisis or the AIDS crisis in the 1980s? Right. So this is the problem, right? Sometimes the things seem like conspiracy theories, but they're supported, right? They're supported with evidence and facts. So then what is conspiracy theory? Right. The research on this subject academically has exploded over the last 8 years. I have no idea why. Because the world got weird, right? I wrote my dissertation on this subject, and when I started writing, there were maybe a handful of academic literature on the subject. And then and then as I was researching, like I kept having to find there more stuff kept getting published. One of the problems is that philosophical research has struggled to create a succinct definition. And the same thing occurs with what I call philosophy's children, right? The subjects that philosophy has spawned: political science, sociology, psychology, and then the hybrids between all three of those. They have their definitions are interesting, they're good, but they all have problems. And going through each of their problems would be a separate talk. So we're gonna just put it aside right now. So the proper definition of a conspiracy theory is an alternate explanation of an event or phenomenon for which the central claim is a purposeful cover-up of the truth by a group of actors for which the evidence is inadequate to support the claim. And this definition, in my opinion, because, well, I'm also the one who wrote it, I think it covers everything, all of the extreme cases. It also covers the edge cases, and it excludes like the Nixon explanation for, or the Nixon hypothesis. It excludes the Osama bin Laden did 9/11 theory, even though that is a conspiracy, right? He secretly organized that attack, but it's not a conspiracy theory because there's evidence which supports the claim. So this definition includes what I call omni-conspiracies. These are reality-bending conspiracy theories, like those of David Icke or the Flat Earth conspiracy theory, which sometimes I get a little pushback calling Flat Earth a conspiracy theory, but I don't understand why, because they claim NASA is the head of the conspiracy. But even without those claims, right, the science that they need, science itself lies to us if the Flat Earth is true, right? The reality isn't real. Right. It also includes our Illuminati or anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, popular with Kanye West right now, for some reason, that are very similar, but the only difference between, say, an Illuminati conspiracy theory and that of David Icke is it lacks a supernatural element. Event conspiracy theories, such as those concerning the Kennedy assassination or the 9/11 attacks. However, the definition also includes alternative medicine as well. Most people do not think of alternative medicine as a conspiracy theory. My research and writings, I call it an implied conspiracy theory, because if homeopathy works, right, if diluting something makes it stronger, then there has to be a massive conspiracy theory of pharmaceutical companies, university researchers, hospitals, all like the entire medical world has to be colluding to suppress it. So what this talk is concerned with, though, is not just the definition. I just have to begin with that. It's how you get somebody from a small conspiracy theory that concerns an event to the reality-bending conspiracy theories of something like QAnon. Right. So what makes a natural living vegan storm the Capitol under the pretense that he's going to stop the stolen election or whatever his deal is? He's still alive, to defend the presidency of a person who normally despises the natural living vegan types. Right. That picture is remarkable in the fact that he's with that group. Generally, you would not have expected that to be the case at the time. Something brought that person into conspiracy theorizing. The unnamed person that murdered 10 people at a grocery store near my house did not do that as an impulse. So I'm from Buffalo, for those people that got in a little late. And they, in May, we had a mass shooting. I guess it was our turn. And it was just this kid drove 200 miles to a grocery store and shot a bunch of people to start the war against the Great Replacement, right? It was not an impulse. He drove too far, prepped too much. Something brought him into that, right? Yeah, 200 miles. He prepped a live feed. That's what I meant to say. You gotta remember, right? His motive to fight the Great Replacement of white people by African Americans, Hispanics, any other immigrant group, which is why he chose the grocery store relatively close to my house by a couple miles, although different story. He did not start there either, right? He didn't start at the Great Replacement. The Q shaman did not start as being, the Q shaman. Let's illustrate this with an example that should work on a group of skeptics and atheists, i.e. nerds, right? You want to pick up fantasy literature? You like Tolkien? No one starts with the Silmarillion. That is not the case. Most people start with The Hobbit. Some start with Fellowship, or the Lord of the Rings trilogy. But no one cracks open Tolkien for the first time and reads this sentence, right? There was Eru, the one who in Arda is called a Luvatar. I don't know, I've only read it. You couldn't do it, right? It's too dense. Even trying to describe it to someone else, it's too much to get someone interested in the work, right? How would you describe it? You'd have to say, so, okay, there's these two trees that are light, and then there's a giant spider that eats them at the behest of the evil god-ish creature. But then the light of the trees is contained in these jewels, and that's the whole story. Right? No, absolutely not. Right? What happens is you read The Hobbit, you read The Lord of the Rings, you watch the trilogy. You can skip the Hobbit trilogy. And then you want more, so you dive into the more esoteric and dense of the works. Similarly, no one wakes up one day and decides, I think King Charles is really a shape-shifting lizard monster who feeds off of despair and covets our gold. Also, we live in a computer simulation, so really none of that is real. No one wakes up one day and decides the world is really flat and NASA has been making us all believe in a lie, right? There is a starting point for conspiracy theorizing that slowly brings a person in so that they will eventually believe the larger stories. We should make no mistake, right? The popular conspiracy theorists are very aware of this and do not open with their most outlandish claims, which is kind of why the flat earth thing petered out. I mean, also COVID kind of made it irrelevant. It wasn't fun anymore. But the flat earth thing opens with the world is flat. Most people are like, all right, no, I can't. This is going to be weird. But it made it a laughing stock, right? Flat earthers were, ridiculed a lot and stuff, but they kind of did it by starting there. Right? David Icke does not begin his lectures with, before the flood into the city of Ur, these aliens interbred with humans. In the book of Enoch, they're called the Nephilim, and they shapeshift into human form to control us, right? He knows that people are going to leave or turn that right off, right? And they'll probably begin considering whether or not he needs some serious help. Conspiracy theories don't attract on fantastic claims, nor do they attract with their, quote, facts, unquote. Conspiracy theories rope people in by appealing to something else, which, well, all right, there's a lesson coming, never mind. Conspiracy theory evangelists begin with a question, right? They begin with a question, it's just simply put, like, do you think it's odd that, whatever, or did you ever notice that, right? Conspiracy theories begin with questions to hook the individual. 9/11 truthers didn't begin with Bush did 9/11, right? They asked, isn't it weird that jet fuel only burns at half the temperature it takes to make steel or to melt steel? But then the building still collapsed, right? A good conspiracy theorist gets the listener to make their own connections. The jet fuel question not only supplies the first piece of, quote, information, unquote, for the conspiracy theory, but it also gets the person thinking, right? They begin thinking, what else do I think I know that I don't know? QAnon asks, have you ever noticed how high the prices are for simple aluminum cabinets on Wayfair? Hashtag save our children. They don't come out with the explanation first, right? They want you to click on that hashtag because it is weird that a regular Olivia storage cabinet costs $12,000. Right? This thing's normally a couple $100 max. Right? They appeal to a person's inquisitiveness, and then they appeal to their emotions. Right? Conspiracy theories are primarily irrational. And it's not irrational like stupid. Irrational like as in they're emotional. They prey on emotions like fear. This is how they get people to be hooked. In some cases, a person gets hooked on a conspiracy theory because it makes them feel smarter or more unique than anyone else. They possess the singular truth, not the fake truth that the masses believe, right? They're smarter, they're above that, right? This appeal attaches to their ego. After all, we all like to feel smarter, and conspiracy theories makes this easier, right? After all, you can't know more about the flat earth than a flat earther because it's all fictional. Anything you can say at them, they could have a more important fact because, well, they're kind of making, in a lot of cases, they're making it up as they go, right? And it's impossible to outsmart a conspiracy theorist who can just rely on their imagination to support their argument. Right. The possession of the special knowledge, though, is a feeling that needs to be fed, right? The superiority wears off. As they get deeper and deeper into a conspiracy theory, they're going to realize, well, now everyone in their bubble, their Reddit community, whatever it is, knows everything that they do, right? It's the same. Everyone knows about the conspiracy theory. So what they'll need to do is increase their knowledge of the theory. They'll need to get more into it. And once they've seen enough of that, they'll start disagreeing with other people who believe in the theory. The knowledge that someone else might know more than them about the truth, the quote truth, unquote, it will be taken as an insult. It'll be a direct attack on their ego, their special knowledge. The conspiracy belief, like religious belief, there's some parallels here, becomes a part of their personality. And when you challenge their view, when you challenge the conspiracy theorist view, I'm sure you might have this experience, it's not just a disagreement, right? What you're doing is challenging a core of their personality. You're telling that part of their identity is wrong. With flat earthers, it's difficult because it's a crazy belief system. But when you tell them that the earth is round, they get angry, not because they're realizing that they're wrong. They're getting angry because you're telling them that a piece of them is wrong. And that makes them very defensive, right? That's how they're, if they're at that point, that's who they are. Or perhaps the reason they're told that the reason the kids seem so different these days, right, is because of whatever, X, doesn't matter. It's not because the younger generation always seems different and odd to the older generations. The reason is because the omnipresent, they are crumbling society from within, right? And this conspiracy theory of this kind, right, our critical race theory, conspiracy theorists, that you're definitely more familiar with in Florida than I am up here in New York. Right, it forms a protection for people who don't want to admit that perhaps they've been benefiting off of a flawed system, or they don't want to adapt to cultural shifts, right? Pronouns, right, the pronoun fights that we're having aren't about growing recognition of different people, right? They're about eliminating Christianity. They're about eliminating a person's worldview, a person's identity. All right, banning critical race theory is about making sure that reverse racism isn't taught, not a growing recognition that the legal system has been prejudiced against African Americans since its inception. A person enters the conspiracy world through one of those reasons, right? Either ego, defensiveness, or an appeal to their inquisitiveness, something like that. They get in there. Then they find a conspiracy theory that reinforces one of those three belief systems. There's some others as well. A lot of the psychological research is trying to divide up the differences and why people get attracted to them. But they find a conspiracy theory that reinforces one of those beliefs. And the initial theory, it'll be something small. I wrote for the skeptic, the British skeptic about this. Like I said, the small ones matter. When people will begin believing in conspiracy theory, just like a little tiny one, just something, it'll be silly. But this is what we call the event conspiracy theory, and sometimes it's the first step in down the spiral. Small, isolated, and don't exactly fit into larger conspiracy worldviews. No, excuse me. Right. So one that's very, very popular is Ancient Aliens. Right. It's one of the sillier ones. I know people that are fans of this, fans of the show or the series, or not the books. The books are bad, and I don't mean they're just badly written. And say nobody's just really reading those books unless they're doing reissues of them and somebody's cleaned up the writing. I mean, I call it silly, but if it didn't possess this weird latent racism in it and was not, I think, the currently longest running show on the what used to be called the History Channel. I mean, it's still called that, but I don't know why we still call it that. And you could think of this as true without storming a Capitol building or believe that political opponents are demon-worshiping pedophiles. Right? You could do this, but you also could not. Right? This is where the concern is. Believing in the ancient aliens could be the first, the beginning of the descent. Right? Again, I want to be very clear. Some people, perfectly rational skeptics that I know will entertain like one or two conspiracy theories, and they'll be isolated and compartmentalized. And if you talk to them about it, they'll roll their eyes and they'll admit, they'll be like, yeah, I know it's a silly thing, but whatever. It's just a thing I can't get rid of. I can't shake. Sometimes they're fun. They're silly. The Shakespeare denialism is one of my pet theories. I don't agree with it at all, but it's like one of the ones I like researching the most. Because it's surprising how many smart people believe in it. But some people entertain them. It's okay, right? The problem is that when the first theory leads to a second theory, and the second theory is probably a little related to the first, right? It builds on it. It's also probably a little less supported than the first. So it's just a little more of a leap of logic you have to make to buy into it. Whereas the first conspiracy theory is a question, or did you ever notice that? Whatever the theory is, the second theory will make more concrete claims, right? So we'll start like, did you ever notice that Wayfair sells their crappy aluminum? I should say crappy. I don't know. Sells their aluminum cabinets for like $20,000. Like, that's kind of weird, right? It's hashtag save the children. The next claim will be like, do you ever notice that, hey, Tom Hanks doesn't age? I mean, even though he clearly does, but maybe he's killing children somewhere. Like it'll be related, but definitely be a solid claim. So what am I basing this off of? Basing this on? I'm basing this on is a lot of psychological and sociological research that tell us what the biggest predictor of conspiratorial belief is. The first, it's not education level, it's not income level, it's not your race, it's not your gender, it's not your sex, it's not any of those things, right? The biggest predictor of conspiratorial belief is that you already believe in a different conspiracy theory, which, okay, yeah, that's question begging, right? That's literally begging the question, right? Yeah, if you believe in a theory, you're going to believe in a conspiracy. Like you believe in a conspiracy theory, you're going to believe in a conspiracy theory. But it's to a point, right? Because it's not the same theory, right? We're not saying like you believe in one theory, so we're going to predict that you believe in that theory. What we're saying is if you're going to take the leap of logic to believe in a conspiracy theory, what you're going to do is you're going to come from a place where you've already taken that leap of logic once, right? And that's all. Conspiracy theories always require those. And this phenomenon is known as cascade logic. Cascade logic is just how all of our reasoning is like an edifice. And if you're willing to suspend belief to accept, if you're willing to suspend your rational thinking or your critical thinking skills to believe in one thing, the next thing is going to be a little easier, and it forms this cascade. By the end of the line, you're in David Icke's territory, right? and this makes more sense if I can analogize it like that it's a story, right? In order for the believer to accept the conspiracy theory, they have to allow part of their rational mind to be overridden. Right? Doing this once to accept a specific belief will make it easier to do it again for another belief. My favorite analogy of this is 2008, right? The very first of the MCU movies, which was pretty much an ad-libbed kind of goofy movie about a guy who puts on a magic armor suit. But all we had to do to accept that story was believe that in a cave in, I think it was Afghanistan, an inventor genius could make an infinite energy machine, right? That's all we had to accept. Oh, there we go. Okay. So by 2018, there we go. Yep. In 2008, we're all ready to accept Tony Stark's infinite energy magic. By 2018, we weren't even blinking at a magic gauntlet in time travel, right? That was just the way it was, because all we had to do was accept all these little things every subsequent movie. If you are prepared to accept the tenuous evidence for aliens that built the pyramids, you're also prepared to accept the next conspiracy theory that has some kind of relationship to the first. So, for example, your spiral might look like this. It starts with ancient aliens. It moves on to Roswell, and I guess whatever crashed there, which was the government tells us was not a weather balloon. That's in the news all the time, right? But a nuclear weapons monitoring device. And that's why they couldn't admit it what it was. But you go from Roswell to Area 51, then you're talking about the different alien races, like the Greys, and then you're down to shape-shifting lizard monsters. I don't know. I know I posted this on my Facebook, so I don't know if she's here. But I have a friend named Heather who this was the one that she experienced. She used to run a yoga group. And then during COVID, you have all these natural living people that were in yoga that, they wanted to be healthy and fit, and they talk about their keto diets or whatever diet was the fad back then, back during the lockdown 3 years ago. And they would go from there to the big pharma, right? They I don't know about medicine and stuff. And then they would go into alternative medicine, touch therapy, Reiki, those kinds of things. And then from there, it was a quick jump to anti-vaccination, because you don't know what the big pharma people are really putting in them. And then they became the Bill Gates created COVID QAnon people. And it got so annoying, she had to shut down her one yoga group. Hi, if you're in here, she gave me permission for that story for a different talk. So I just use it all the time now. So the need to fill the emotional charge, like there's an endorphin hit with every new theory. This is especially true during the pandemic, where people were just bored. For an entire year, we couldn't do anything or go anywhere. You needed some kind of stimulation. And isolated people who were despairing of the worldwide plague got sucked in, right? As the believer perceives the emptiness in the theory, in the actual conspiracy theory, they'll eventually figure it out. Instead of just abandoning the theory, they begin looking for anything which justifies the claim to re-energize that theory. In the spiral is the slow dragging in of the person that by the end, they are not coming back out. As the lockdowns around me were starting to end, the newspaper articles where I saw a bunch of paper, like from the Verve and some other places, talking about people that lost relatives to QAnon, right? They couldn't get them out because they were just by themselves. They got sucked in, and it's very, it's slowly, by the time they realized what was happening, like they were too far into it. Right. So that's how this spiral works. And I think it would be probably a bad talk if I ended there. So let's try some solutions. Right. So what are the solutions? Right. This would be very, very depressing if I didn't have at least some suggestions. I teach a course on this subject at SUNY Geneseo. And one of the things I tell the course over and over again is if you're coming into this class thinking you've got a magic bullet to get Uncle Frank to stop bringing it up every Thanksgiving. Like, you're in the wrong class. You should stay, but like, that's the only reason you're here, you should go. So new skeptics and new atheists, recent converts, they get this smile on their face. I've seen it. I've done it. I've been there. When facing a believer, right? I, for example, know every reason that the flat earth theory does not hold water because I understand how the earth holds water. Facts do not work against conspiracy theories. That's the other mantra in my courses. I tell them almost every other class I have to explain this. Facts do not work. Adjusting for the topic, right? As the esteemed Dr. House once said in one of his episodes, right? If facts worked on conspiracy theorists, there wouldn't be any conspiracy theorists. Now I'm adjusting it. He said if facts worked on religious people, there wouldn't be any religious people, but just adjusting it for the skeptical worldview. The reason that facts do not work, as should be clear, I guess, is that they weren't the thing that convinced them in the first place. The conspiracy theorist was not convinced by facts, so facts aren't going to convince them out of it, right? Even a small event conspiracy theory, as I've said, to reiterate, I think it's important that I repeat this, doesn't begin with the facts, right? The appeal is emotional and eventually it becomes personal. Attacking facts will be perceived as attacking the person. And they can just deny facts, remember. Like if you're arguing against David Icke, he could just say like, well, none of those facts are real because we live in the matrix. It's not. What can you say to that kind of person? Coincidentally, though, I found that vaccination is better than treatment, right? So my ideas here would be that we should teach the basics of critical thinking and philosophical skepticism to people so that we can prevent the beliefs from ever taking place. And I would suggest teaching these skills to kids as young as 6, right? As soon, kindergartners. Here's an idea, like let's teach them just some basic critical thinking skills. Just the very basic concepts of cause and effect and testability, though. I'm not saying like we should teach them modus ponens and logical argumentation that young, but just cause and effect and testability. Right? Somebody says something, how do you know it's true? Right? This just that kind of thing. Right? We could teach them Occam's razor. Right? It's not so complex that a kid is incapable of understanding it. Right? Small children understand what this means. And mostly because they break it all the time when they're trying to explain how they didn't break the glass. Right? Just a simple lesson in explanatory parsimony can set them on the path to rational thinking. Although I wouldn't use those words because, they're 6-year-olds, right? Though I doubt you could convince many school districts to teach it. I don't care how liberal or pro-science your school district is. I don't think you could get them to be like, yeah, let's teach them philosophical skepticism, but I think it would really help. For people already sucked down the well, the methodology is slow and painful. It is personal. And there's no magic brush that we can get them out of it. I don't know why I typed brush. I should say bullet, but this gets them out. Right. Again, no, facts do not work. It merely activates what we call the double down effect. Right. The believer will stand firmer on their position as they feel that their identity is being challenged. Right. Compassionate skepticism is the surest possible way, but it's a very unsure road, and it's a very long one. And this is what I would suggest. Instead of challenging them on what they believe, ask them why they believe it. Right? Why should they take the word of Joe Rogan when every single medical professional on the planet disagrees with them? So I run a skeptics group. Drinking Skeptically, we're a social group once a month, and we had a meeting on Friday night, and my Lyft driver on the way home was a COVID denier, and I tried this on him. It didn't work. It doesn't work all the time, but this is literally what he had said. It's like, well, I don't know. Joe Rogan says that ivermectin healed him. I'm like, yeah, but every other medical person on the planet says that's wrong. It's like, why is Joe Rogan more important? And then he tried to change the subject, and I was a little inebriated, so I was like, no, I can't do this right now. When they give them that tepid explanation, ask them if they would accept the same standard of evidence going the other way, right? the idea, the goal here is not to show them how absurd their beliefs are, but to get them to realize it for themselves, right? If they can arrive at the contradiction or absurdity themselves, they may begin to pull themselves out of it. But the pull of the spiral is strong, right? The reason it is because people, we don't like to admit that we were wrong. We really don't. This is a big thing with us. Human beings are very bad at that. People stay in relationships way too long. They keep fixing cars that they should get rid of, right? This is the sunken cost fallacy. So the pull may not get them out of it, right? They may, or sorry, the pull may keep them in. But that's really the only way, is to get them to realize that it's wrong. Most people will straight refuse, like, no, that doesn't feel right. But the general idea is that they have to be led, not forced. Not only do we not like to admit we're wrong, we really hate it when someone else tries to tell us we were wrong. Right? And that's, you have to lead them, compassionate skepticism, the best way. Get them to arrive at the contradiction themselves. That's, or maybe sometimes just saying it out loud will help them, will make them realize it, right? When they try and tell it to somebody else, it's one thing to type it in a Reddit forum or in a Facebook fight. It's a completely different to look at a person's face when you're trying to explain it to them. Thank you for your time. That is the end of the presentation. I will stop sharing. Pause share. Okay.
Got it?
And, yes. Thanks. Oh, wait, how do I go back to main screen? I don't remember how to do it.
You go up to the stop share. Oh, well, let me get rid of
Oh,
the-
there, I got it. There we go. Okay. Yes. All right.
Okay. If you have questions, please raise your electronic hand. The way you do that is in reactions. If you click on that little button down at the bottom of your screen and raise hand, and then we'll take questions. I will say that in Florida, what QAnon did was they started advertising for women. They geared it towards women to come and to a rally about making sure children were safe. I mean, they
Yes.
started way out there because everybody wants to make sure children are safe. And then, you know, it didn't look like QAnon was doing it, but when I dug a little further down, I saw that it was QAnon doing it. And most people aren't going to do that. They just think it's a general rally. So they started way away from their conspiracy. Okay, Michael has a question.
It's really more of a question about research, but there's another type of conspiracy theory that I found, is that there's conspiracy theories that are couched in quote unquote traditional knowledge. For instance, I was reading this one guy that was a Native American who had read Velikovsky, you know, about there were dinosaurs in Africa and all this stuff. And then he extended that, saying that they had traditional knowledge that there was dinosaurs in native North America and that this is being covered up. And, you know, it's a scientific conspiracy and all that. But, you know, everything that he was saying was completely lifted off of Velikovsky, though.
Okay. Yeah, Velikovsky of the meteor. He had like a meteor theory or something that hit the Earth a long time ago. Not the real one. Velikovsky. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yes. So I was wondering, has anybody ever done any like research into that sort of conspiracy theory? Because I come across that a lot of people, and then you question them. They're like, "Well, this is traditional knowledge. You can't question it." My differentiations between conspiracy theories, like when I talk about event and omni conspiracies, comes from a book by Michael Barkoon. I could type his. I'll put his name in the chat. So. And I think it is Culture of Conspiracy is the book. And he spends a chapter talking about the different types of knowledge and how that feeds into conspiracy theories. It made up a part of my dissertation, which is why I kind of
feeling a little weird about not remembering the title of the book. But he does talk about traditional knowledge as being one of the foundations of conspiracy theory work. I hadn't heard of this particular theory that you're telling me about, where there were dinosaurs in North America. That's a new one. I'm interested in that. I'm gonna be looking that one up later. So yeah, no, the traditional knowledge people are unwilling to let go of folk knowledge sometimes, because it's it's the culture. Yes, okay, that is right. It is people are unwilling to let go of that because it's it's the thing that worked, or it's part of their cultural identity, that kind of thing. So yeah, no, there's
But
been some.
That was just it. This isn't a part of his cultural knowledge. This is something he got from Velikovsky, turned it around and said that this is traditional knowledge. I mean, there's nothing before him that suggests that whatsoever.
Okay, I see. All right, yes.
Completely out of Velikovsky.
I understand. Yeah, so he's using the like it's traditional as sort of a shield.
Right, exactly.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah, I misunderstood what you meant. But that is oh, that's interesting. That's still I'm still gonna look up this theory. This sounds really good. Because it's so outlandish. There's dinosaurs. I would love if there were dinosaurs. That sounds great. And yeah, no, it's good. Yes, I think for that angle, I don't think anyone's done that. Is appealing to like a fake tradition as a shield. I can't recall of anybody who's done research on it. No.
Okay, Michael, thank you. Didn't really answer your question, but that's all you did.
Well, the answer was nobody's done it, as far as I could tell.
Thank you, Michael. Vijaya?
Yes, there's Regia.
Vijaya, sorry.
Change this to
I have a two-part question. Do you consider the belief in God a conspiracy theory? And do you have any statistics of people in the conspiracy community, QAnon and such, that were secular people?
Okay, so two questions here. To the first one, no. I don't believe that religious belief is a conspiracy theory. Now, there's obviously going to be cases where there are people that are religious that are conspiracy theorists, but just as much, I would say that generally this is not the case. There's obviously overlap, and there is some sort of there is some suspension of disbelief when it comes to religious belief. Obviously, I'm talking to a room full of atheists, so of course, right? But it's not the same thing, right? It's not the same kind of thing. We may see in 10 years, unfortunately, people that were raised in conspiracy theory households, but generally this has not been the case. So I don't consider the religious belief to be a conspiracy theory for. It's just too.
A correlation. Do you see a correlation?
A correlation between religious belief and people who believe in conspiracy theories. I haven't read any research, so I'm going to preface with that. But there is a correlation though. I do believe that, because I would like some sociologist would have to do this work for me, because it would be easier than me doing. Yeah, I think there is. I mean, if we look at the modern conspiracy theory movement like QAnon, like that's deeply religious at its core, right? That is, I think the Freedom from Religion Foundation and the Southern Baptist Conference they released a report on the January. I might be getting the religious group mixed up with a different one, but they released a report on the January 6th, right? The insurrection attempt. And they talked about how religious that movement was. Flat Earth, to a lot of people's surprise, at the bottom of the Flat Earth conspiracy theory is a religious worldview. You have ISIS was built on a conspiracy theory, and that was entirely religious worldview. And even some of the minor stuff, because the motivation for conspiracy theories is sometimes a fear of cultural shifting. Right? It's a fear of cultural change. There's a book written in the 80s called Architects of Fear. And in it, that guy talks about the late 70s and early 80s political movements who were starting to get real. They started bringing like the Illuminati conspiracy theories into mainstream. The mainstream political sphere. He blames I think Goldwater the most, but like Reagan was doing it too. And he said that the Illuminati conspiracy theory at its core is always conservatism afraid of the future. He put it a different way, but I can't remember the exact quote. And he said the reason that people latch onto it is because it explains cultural shifts. And because religion, no matter how, like, with the exception of the Unitarians, who are, basically deists, every religion is, no matter how liberal it wants to consider itself, is a generally steeped in, it generally adheres to tradition. And conspiracy theories offer a way to define to explain why the world is changing around them. I just finished John Robison, the Scottish scientist from the 18th century, his book called Proofs of a Conspiracy, and then it's like a paragraph long. It's this long title, but it's the very first book to cite the Illuminati conspiracy theory, right? There couldn't be an earlier one. He's writing it when Adam Weishaupt is still alive. And his whole book is it's supposed to be about this grand conspiracy theory. But what it actually is him complaining about the kids these days. He doesn't like the way that Freemasonry has changed. He doesn't like the fact that there was a group in Germany that was trying to make not in Germany, sorry, it wasn't Germany then, it was the German-speaking states. There was a group in the German-speaking states trying to make books available to everybody free of charge. And he talks about the French Revolution and how the post-revolution women, I hope you're all sitting down for this. Women were going to the operas bare-shouldered. I know. It's just take a second to recover from that. He complains about it. And you're like, this whole book is about him trying to justify those complaints. And I think that, the crossover is very easy for religious people because religion is notoriously against change. Right. They've always, you always have to drag them kicking and screaming into the present or to the 20 years ago at the very least. So, I think there is a correlation. Now, your third question, if I remember correctly, was, are there secularists that are conspiracy theorists? Yes, but I don't have any statistics for like what the percentage of them is. I will say that we are not immune to it, and it's silly to think that we are. If you're like, oh no, I'm an atheist, so how could I not believe in a conspiracy? I mean, you look at all the members of our community that have been, disgraced through either, sexual misconduct in some fashion, and they go like hard right-wing conservative conspiracy theories. Like, we're all prone to it. But I don't have any statistics to say like how many people who believe in David Icke don't believe in God. Actually, that's a bad example because you couldn't. He's a religious conspiracy theory. But I don't have any statistics for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dave. Jim Young.
I'd like to call into the question the notion that religious dogma is not a conspiracy theory. And in order to do that, I would like to offer a couple of religious beliefs and see whether or not they fit the criteria. For example, millions of people are pretending to know with absolute certainty that a supernatural realm exists, inhabited by invisible and all-powerful entities possessing the authority and the absolute right to micromanage every aspect of human existence. Furthermore, These millions are pretending to have a personal relationship with a supernatural entity, which they call God. In the supernatural realm, they also pretend to know the mind of their supernatural entity. They are pretending they have been ordained to act as intermediaries between the supernatural realm and the natural world. They claim to have been charged with the authority and responsibility of communicating and enforcing the will and dictates of their supernatural masters. And these pretenders insist that no human being has any right to question, object, challenge, or resist any of their unfalsifiable presuppositions. All of humanity, they claim, without evidence, is justly obliged to submit to every aspect of this faith-based self-subjugation or face severe punishment. It is under this coercive tyranny that they pretend they are exercising freedom of conscience and free will.
Okay,
These
Jim, let's wind it
I'll
up.
be done in a second. Please have patience. These pretenders insist that revelation, intuition, spirits, holy books, clever arguments, and preachers are all valid sources of knowledge, revealing an alternate reality where the unknowable becomes accessible and known only to God's chosen few, of which they pretend to know with certainty that they are among. Now, every single one of those things sounds to me a whole lot like a conspiracy theory. So I don't understand how we divorce religion from conspiracy theories, and I'll leave it to you now.
I would say because there's no cover up. Like there's no cover up in anything you're claiming. There's no the religious people who the religious person who believes in everything that you've just listed there isn't claiming that there's a secret that is being actively concealed from the rest of the population. Right? Generally, they say that, like, people need to learn. Like, the Super Bowl is going to start soon, and I think the Hobby Lobby people are going to do a Jesus commercial. Right. And, because they think that people need to hear about this, but there's no organized effort to keep people from being religious. Now, in some religious groups definitely believe that, right? In their conspiratorial religious groups, but a religious belief in itself does not contain a cover up or a concealment as a necessary function or as a necessary tenet of the belief. And when they do, they get a little culty, right? The Scientologists are kind of like that. The Jim Jones cult was like that, right? You had to be a member to know the truth. Right? So there's no cover up there. That's why I would say it's not the same thing.
Okay, Jim, did that kind of answer your question?
Yes and no, because I believe that the cover-up does exist when they claim that you have to have the Holy Spirit and know their God before you can see that the truth of what they claimed is truth.
I would dispute that. I don't think that's a cover-up, though, right? That's just like, if you want to go to heaven, you have to believe in our thing, right? They're not. I mean, they'll happily share with you that information. Much to the chagrin of even if you don't want to hear it, sometimes they tell it to you anyway.
Well, I've had them tell me that I cannot know the truth because I don't have the Holy Spirit, and that is a cover-up. That is their guaranteed insurance policy that they have an argument that I can't defeat.
Okay, Jim, we're going to go on to another person because we've got a whole bunch of hands up here, but thank you, and you can raise your hand again later if you want, okay? Thank you. Hamid, show care.
Up there.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
I'm sorry that because the moment I raised my hand and everybody's asking the same question in a different way. So, but basically, like, so you said that there is no cover up for religious belief, but the way that I personally see it is the cover up. The big cover up is to control the masses by religious belief systems, and I come from because I come from a background where I was born and raised from Islam, and I've denounced that since 2009, and I've been focusing on the science of that things that really feeds my logic needs in everything that I can ask about, which religious belief doesn't do that in any other way. But I do believe that the big cover up is they don't want to tell people that they've been controlled by religion, if you know what I mean. So my question is, I'm sorry. So my question is, so you said that in your presentation that you quoted Dr. House, where about the facts and right. So and you said that there's a similarity between conspiracy theory and religious belief. But where does that similarity ends? Because everything has been seen, especially with the spiral to the conspiracy theory, is the same thing, where the belief system is based on that the infinite energy that's been created inside a cave. That's the first piece of information, and each religious belief system starts with a little simple conspiracy theory or a theory or something that's not tangible. You can't really prove that. And you build everything upon that. So the similarities for me is so much that, but where does that end?
Well, I think that the primary difference is that like I was raised Catholic. I haven't been Catholic since 2000-ish. And I think the difference is that with conspiracy theories, you tend to start with religious belief, you tend to start all the way in, right? Religious belief tends to begin with children. You know, you are raised in a religious household, and then as you go on, you get the little arguments, right? So I was born when I was born, my default state growing up was Catholic, right? I was Christian, and everything else was, you know, just piled onto that. So all the arguments for it, all the sacrament, like it's just default status. This is true, right? I don't remember hearing an argument for Catholicism until maybe my junior year of high school, so 11th grade. I would say that's where one of the similarities or one of the differences, the chief differences between them is, which I think I got off track. What was the question again?
So my question was, for me personally, there's so much similarities between conspiracy theory and religious beliefs. But where does that similarity ends? And you just mentioned that. Like you start to reveal the truth in religious belief system in a younger age than the conspiracy theory. You more exposed to it. So I didn't get it. I'm sorry.
No, what I was saying was that the private. My thing about the spiral is that you start with the little stuff and then you end up with the big truth, right? The big truth. With religious belief, you tend to the big truth is never proven to you. It's more of a practical difference than it is like an ontological difference, where it's a definitional thing. And I feel that with the reason I don't like to compare the two, or I'm sorry, I don't like to say that both of them are the same, is that it's because when you're raised religious, that's just the world, right? You're just religious in the world. It's why the Catholics baptize everyone at 0, right? As soon as they come out, they're like, when are you getting baptized? And the other differences between them are conspiracy theories don't necessarily require the supernatural element, although some do. But generally speaking, you can believe the CIA killed Kennedy and never have a ghost or anything into it. Religious belief, by definition, has to have this supernatural element. And I think that's probably one of the most important differences, because you're a room full of atheists again. Trying to argue against religious people is very difficult because they'll just make that appeal. Like, they got that in their pocket the whole time. It's like, well, how come? If you talk to a young Earth creationist, you'd be like, well, that star is more than 6,000 light years away. How's that possible? It's like, well, God did it to fool us, to test our faith or something. And it's like, at least with conspiracy theorists, sometimes they have to get a little more creative than that.
All right.
Yeah,
I understand. Yeah,
Hamid, did that answer your question?
it did. It did. In a way, yes, it did.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Dave.
Oh, thank you.
I want to say I'm going to go on to people who haven't had a chance to ask a question yet, and then I'll come back to those who've already asked a question, Michael. So James Shaw, if you could go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, yeah. I was just curious. You mentioned the idea of.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Oh,
Sorry.
No, it's I've got the gallery view, so I'm just looking for everyone's window.
Of
Change that.
teaching critical thinking skills to children at a young age.
Yes.
Prevent them from adopting conspiratorial thinking. I'm wondering if that's just reasonable speculation on your part, or if there's being actual research to support that idea.
There's some preliminary psychological research talking about teaching children critical thinking skills and how that seems to be a preventative measure for them There's some very preliminary research that's made this claim. There's some other older psychological stuff for older people that's looked at why conspiracy theories take hold in certain people when it doesn't in others. And generally speaking, they're like, well, it's not education per se, but it's the type of reasoning that they employ. And again, it's really difficult to say because if I would say like, yeah, we should teach everyone philosophy because I'm a I'm an adjunct philosophy professor. I could use it at work. But then like there's one of the big 9/11 truthers, I can never, David Ray Griffin. He was a philosophy professor. So it's all over the place as far as what we can, what we want to claim. But yeah, there's some early stuff, and it makes intuitive sense to me. And we're gonna try. There's myself and some other people at the school I teach at are trying to get something going with trying to teach high school kids how to read scientific journals so that they're not fooled by like climate change denialism or, just clickbaity headlines. Like, what's the process of learning this kind of thing? I don't think it could hurt just to teach I have 3 children. I teach my 6-year-old or she's older than that now. I teach my young child, my youngest daughter, like, you know what? Here's how you differentiate the truth from bullshit. Like, just simple tests. Is what they're saying reasonable because of that? I don't think it can hurt, but there has been some very preliminary research.
So do you teach your children about Santa Claus?
Yeah, we do that. We do some of the stuff. I know I'm breaking my own thing on that one, but it was like we have a 14-year-old, and it's like we started back then with her, and this wasn't my cause then, so it's just we have to keep it going.
Okay. Gus?
Getting back to the subject of cover-ups,
Yes.
It seems like virtually every religion in the world is trying to cover up something because they're in denial of all the other religions of the world. And then we have an even worse problem in that there are 13 countries in the world today that can legally execute you for being an atheist. Now, if that's not a cover-up, what is?
What I don't know what the cover up there though is. Like they're trying to
covering up the truth.
Well, they're trying to maintain their hold on authority, but they're not being secret about it, right? I think it is. I think it was like Indonesia has they don't have the blasphemy laws, but the police are unwilling to like investigate when some atheist blogger gets hacked to death with machetes, right? There's Saudi Arabia, famously, I think, if you're the wrong kind of you're better off actually, I think, being an atheist than the other kind of Muslim. Right? Like, okay, I think Saudi Arabia is Sunni, and if you're a Shiite, it's actually worse for you. I know that was the case with ISIS. Like ISIS was executing those. but they're not like they're not being secret about it. Ireland had blasphemy laws up until about 10 years ago. But again, these are open, right? They're trying to stop, what they're trying to stop is dissent, right? Because they're using these governments are using religion as their lever to power, right? It's more than just they're trying to cover up the truth, or they're trying to stop people from believing the truth, right? They're trying to maintain their hold on power. I just don't think that without them being secret about it, I don't see that as a cover up. Right. When I mention a cover up as part of the definition of a conspiracy theory, what I mean is that the conspiracy theorist believes that someone else is trying to keep the truth from them. So they're trying to keep the truth of 9/11 from us by feeding us the Bin Laden story, or they're trying to keep the truth of climate change from us by feeding us the "it's happening" story, when it's really about
But that's exactly
Bill Gates
what
and
you're
George
seeing in
Soros.
religion.
Sorry?
You are seeing that in religion. They are saying that their religion is being suppressed because of other people wanting to express what I would consider the truth.
Yeah, and that's where I would say that those groups are being conspiratorial, but the belief system itself is not conspiratorial. Right? And they could use Christian persecution as a way to leverage a couple more, Congress people into office. But there's nothing like, again, I was raised Catholic, so I don't know about like Protestantism generally, but there's nothing in Catholicism that says that there's a secret, right? That's being held from us. I mean, aside from like the mysteries or whatever, but that's just them not being able to explain stuff. There's no concealment tenet of the religion. How the organization uses it is a different story.
Did that answer your question, Gus?
I'm still not satisfied. It's like if someone speaks of there being a secret, then they're in the open. What? It's just not coming together for me.
There has to be in opposition to an official story, right? A conspiracy theory is always in opposition to the official story. With religion, the religion is the official story, according to them.
Well, I will just classify it as being one of those Catholic mysteries or something.
Yeah, I think we might just be able to disagree. It's an interesting proposition. I'm not anti this idea that religion is a conspiracy theory. It's just not. It's definitely an unsupported belief. I'm definitely on the side of that. So I'm not in opposition. I'm sympathetic to your claim. I don't see the truth of it just yet. Like maybe that argument can be made. I'm not dismissing it. I just don't see it.
Okay.
Thanks, Gus.
Yes, thank you.
Dennis?
Yeah, hi. I wanted to share
Dennis.
a cascade story. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Very good. Met a neighbor. He comes up, we're chatting in the street one day, and he talks about that Devil's Tower, the big volcanic structure in Wyoming, is a fossilized tree stump, and that giants used to roll the earth, and when they died and went to sleep, they just laid down and they became our mountains, and they built the pyramids, not. So I did some research on the geology of Devil's Tower. I saw him a few months later, and I related that to him, and didn't matter. And then turns out he's a flat earther, and there are no stars or planets in the skies. Those are
Right.
all with a giant crystal dome over us. And
Yes.
that's where I kind of stopped.
He's a dome flat earther, not an infinite space flat earther.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
I thought,
The Devil's. I just looked it up as you mentioned it. That's a tree, huh? Okay.
well, and the legend was actually created by a couple of disc jockeys in Wyoming in 2017 because they thought Wyoming needed a new myth. They even know where the origin of it came from.
Awesome. And now people are just buying into it. That's great.
Yes.
Great.
Add that to your list.
I am right now.
Thanks, Dennis.
Sure.
I'm going to go back to Michael now, and then I'll get the new people. Michael?
Yeah, give me a second. Okay, yeah. Now you're mentioning basically one way to combat this was questioning their research and having them do research. But it seems like, for the past 20, 30, 40 years, whatever, I mean, there have been groups, the Christians have went through great lengths to make Christianity seem quote unquote scientific. There's always these new conspiracy theories that pop up that have quote unquote scientific backing. Bigfoot is actually Gigantopithecus, which, impossible. The Loch Ness monster is actually a plesiosaur, again, completely impossible. But they say, this is scientifically proven because, they have the scientific quote unquote proof. So, I mean, I'm not sure actually telling them to do their research is good. And then plus the QAnon, a lot of those people, that's why they go into QAnon, because I did my research. I found out science was wrong.
Right. Yeah, 100% agree on that. The problem generally is this is why I'm trying to work with some people at my school about this on this project, is that people need to be taught how to differentiate good research from bad research. I hate reading journal articles because they're boring and dry, and sometimes they make me want to go to sleep. But that's where the facts are and stuff. But when they say they've done their own research, what I recommend is not making them go back to the internet, go back to their Reddit subgroups and being like, hey, this person said this to me. Why is that true? It's to get them to see the problems in their theory by asking them like really direct questions. Like if for the flat earther who is Dennis's neighbor lives under a crystal dome, it's like, well, where's the dome? Like, how come we can't touch it? And then they'll talk about an ice wall and all this other crap. But I mean, eventually they have to realize, or eventually there should be a point. I shouldn't say they have to. There should be a point. Hopefully there's a point where it's going to run out for them. Again, I would love if there was a simpler answer, but as far as I can tell, this seems to be the only way, is to convince them of or to get them to realize their absurdity rather than forcing it upon them. Believe me, I would love if there was a magic bullet for it.
Yes, wouldn't we all?
And also there's like a second part to that too, is that if there is actual scientific evidence or an actual scientific theory they don't agree with or something, all of a sudden that becomes a conspiracy theory to them.
Yeah.
Because I get that all the time. I teach cultural anthropology and I teach about the Mississippians at Dino the Hopewell. I tell them, there was major civilizations here before the Europeans. And they're like, no, there wasn't. It's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but we have the evidence. We have the sites. We find the remains of the people. We find the evidence of the civilization. But they're like, yeah, but we know because, our church tells us the Europeans came here first. If it wasn't for the Europeans, Native Americans would all be living in teepees, but hardly any Native Americans live in teepees, but that's what I see in the movies. So, I mean,
yeah,
I don't know. The research angle, I just have a lot of problems with, because research these days isn't, what it used to be. You can find whatever you want that's going to back you up. You could find some quote unquote scientific site, and some of these scientific sites. Plus, I will say I've met PhDs who will tell you that ghosts are real and aliens are real. So even that, you can find an academic who will back you up on just about any conspiracy theory.
Whenever I've hit that wall, the one question I do like to ask, it seems to at least give them pause, and sometimes it's all you can get, is to ask them to point out how big the conspiracy theory would have to be, right? So with your example where you're trying to explain that there was a group living along the Mississippi prior to European colonization in the 15th century, it's like, okay, well then how many people are actively covering this up, right? Is it every anthropologist on the planet is secretly involved in big anthropology or something like that? I mean, you're an academic. I mean, we don't work together. We try and always one up each other. Right? It's the competitive nature of academics. So with homeopathy, I mentioned this in the beginning. When people say that, and like, well, I've done the research. Like I've got all these, doctors that say it works. It's like, okay, so then why doesn't Pfizer or one of these big pharmaceutical companies patent it? Right? Like why is the conspiracy so powerful and so big but they can't stop you from blogging? Like there's inconsistencies sometimes is the best way to attack. I think I lost him. Oh no, there is. Okay.
No, he just took his hand down.
it jumps around.
Yes.
Yeah. So sometimes pointing out like what their belief is and what it leads to will sometimes work as well if the research doesn't. Should really write a thing on the different tactics.
Yes. Thank you, Michael. Vijaya?
Thank you. Okay. Oh, top left. All right, that's handy.
Yes.
I have few comments to make, and then I have another question.
Sure.
So when you were talking about conspiracy and covering things up, the greatest conspiracy I can see in Christianity is the Immaculate Conception. That's a cover up. It's like there is no proof to it. They're hiding something. It's just a comment. And also there is a group called Christians Against Dinosaurs. I don't know if you ever heard of it. They actually believe, you can actually Google them. They believe that archaeologists buried these fake bones across the world to dispute the validity of religion and say it all existed 65 million years ago just to go against religion. So yeah, Christians
Right.
Against Dinosaurs is, and then of course all the atheists go on their groups and troll them. So my question though, unrelated to all these silly things, is there is a thing called the God gene. You probably heard Richard Dawkins came up with the idea, or somebody did write about the God gene. People have a need to believe in illogical things. So as a philosopher, do you think that humans have an innate need to believe in illogical things, and that's why they're doing this? Also, there is a significant portion of Europeans and Australians that are part of the QAnon movement. So that makes me believe it's not just us in America that have to deal with this. This is the much wider problem. So what does the philosopher in you say about the whole thing?
Yeah. Okay. So Christian. So I had not heard particularly about Christians Against Dinosaurs, but that sounds like the Ken Ham, those types, the Discovery Institute, and those types of places. So it's part of the same family, I guess. And that would be an example of religion and conspiracy theories, blending together, right? Because they're obviously claiming a conspiracy of big archaeology, I guess. Whatever. Okay. It's weird to say it out loud. I don't agree with that, the God gene hypothesis. I don't think there's anything in us that needs to believe in a supernatural explanation or to believe in like religion. What I think that we need rather is explanations. Right. In the people that talk about the God gene, like we'll see throughout history, like we've always have had a supernatural explanation for things. That's why religion is true. It's like, yeah, but 2,000 years ago, we didn't know why anything worked. Right. You go 3,000 years ago, we're still throwing people into we're not really, it really happened, but we're sacrificing virgins to volcanoes to make sure that it doesn't, because we didn't know anything. Right. I mean, I think the word hurricane itself is the one of the Caribbean groups names for like a god of death or something. And it's like, yeah, this is this is just, we just explained. Now I don't think that gene holds because we can explain things without, or even if we can't explain it, like with quantum physics, we have a methodology for, oh, there you go. Okay. We have a methodology for how we can figure out things out. Like I don't agree with that hypothesis. It would be a weird gene to have. And I think that's almost circular reasoning, right? We have a God gene that makes us believe in God.
But we can't really evolve as quickly as the science is changing, though. You see what I mean? If humans have that built into them, it takes a while to evolve that out of the equation. So I was just wondering if there is any scientific reason for all these weirdos.
I think they want explanations, like with QAnon and its explosion during COVID. I think it was because people like explanations, even if they're bad explanations, right? I'm sorry, I shouldn't say bad explanations. Like, even if it's an explanation that posits like a global pedophile cabal that purposely got us all sick, it's comforting to know why. There's just a little bit of a, go ahead.
Is it analogous to the God of the gaps? Like we have a gap in knowledge, so we're putting God in it, kind of thing. Like we're putting a conspiracy theory in these days.
Yeah, I think that would be a good analogy. That's a good analogy. Okay. I think I will probably use that analogy in the future. It is like that. I'll say Vijaya's analogy. It is like a God of the gaps argument. I mean, it's, if you can't explain why blah 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 is happening, yeah, it's a conspiracy. Sure, it's a wizard did it, right, from that Simpsons episode.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Thank you. Is that all you had, Vijaya?
Yes, for now. Oh, I asked about the international thing.
Oh, yes.
European thing.
Yeah, Michael Marshall for the Merseyside Skeptic Society pointed this out on his podcast, and I think in one of his articles, that one of the weird things was in England, the QAnon protesters are spelling pedophile the American way.
Oh.
Right. If you look at the way they spell pedophile in England, it's crazy. They got like a bunch of extra vowels in there for some reason. And he pointed out that they started showing, like, so I think in England it's PAED ophile, and here it's just PED because like we don't like the extraneous letters. And he said that's it was weird because when it came over, they adjusted for Brexit, they adjusted for the prime minister, but then they still borrowed the American QAnon pedophile spelling. I don't know why that one spread. It's just the satanic panic all over again, only with like different, the internet instead of people. I'm old enough for the satanic panic. I remember that very clearly when I was a kid. And it's just that again, like, why is this good? And that was in the English speaking world too, right? That was Australia, England, and the US and Canada. I don't know, maybe it's something about the English speaking world that loves our satanic panics.
Could well
Not
be.
sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Vijaya. Linda, who?
Hello? Yeah, hello?
Hello?
Yeah, it's Hugendorn.
Hugendorn,
Yeah,
sorry.
I know it's a hard name, yeah.
I can't read. I don't have my glasses on.
Don't worry about it. Well, anyways, I know it sounds like a dumb theory, but I kind of wonder if another factor in whether or not someone falls for conspiracy theory is if someone is not in a healthy emotional state of mind, like they suffer a lot of feeling of alienation in their daily life, or they're lonely and don't have good family or friend dynamic to keep their mind healthy. Do you think that would make a person more vulnerable to the conspiracy theories? Because when you start believing these things, you get into a very tight-knit community and a sense of belonging.
Yeah, no, I agree without qualification. That's one of the appeals of the incel movement, right? Is that these are lonely guys, usually white, usually young, can't get a date, don't want to improve themselves in any way, And
Okay,
then
they
what they
need
find
to.
is a community that says, hey, you know why Stacy won't date you? It's not because of you, it's because she's the worst. Right. And that's, I mean, that's a horribly dangerous conspiracy theory because that's motivated several different mass shooters.
Yes.
I think San Bernardino it was in California. It was either San Bernardino or some smaller city where this guy just went around shooting all of the what he thought were single women, because he believed in this incel conspiracy. So yeah, well, absolutely. It does give you a community if you can't find it. The kid that shot up the grocery store near me, it was the same thing, only it was racially based rather than sexually based. Found the community of racists. Like, hey, they prey on that weakness, that need for community. Now there is a gene, I believe it's genetic, that we need community, that we have this drive towards community. And that if you don't have that, yeah, that can either get into fantasy football or you end up.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see if people who've joined religious cults without necessarily falling for the Q stuff, and people who are into QAnon have a similar psychological profile overall. Like, that'd be interesting to
Yes.
see.
That
At
would
least
be.
I think so.
Yeah, no, I think so. I agree with you. That would be interesting. I know there's cult research, but I don't think anyone's ever done the comparisons.
Yeah. Oh, maybe you can.
Yeah, maybe. Once I finish the book.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
Did that cover everything?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Okay.
Jim Peterson?
Yes, thank you very much. I've enjoyed this greatly.
Thank you.
I think there is an interesting proposition that there is a conspiracy in the Bible. That is to say, a lot of people engage in numerology. They will add up numbers from this chapter and that, and attempt to demonstrate that doom is certainly headed our way because the numbers do or don't add up. And so there is, I think, a close association between people who are able to acquire a religious belief and those who are also able to exploit this other aspect. And it also goes into more verbal areas with the various kinds of prophecy, as they call it. And they will assemble all kinds of evidence, so-called, to prove what will happen. In other words, they are engaged in prediction rather than explanation. What do you think about those?
I believe was it Newton, one of those people, Isaac Newton? He believed he thought
he was, yes.
Yeah, code in the Bible. Yeah, no, those. What's the guy's name? There's I'm looking to the left to see if I have the book on my shelf or if I brought it. It's in my office. This is Drozvich had the Bible code. It was big, I think, in the mid 90s. He believed he could like crossword puzzle predictions out of the Bible, and it was like it was one of the very first things of my very first skeptical lesson, I think, might have been that book where
that's right.
Either a very young, not very young, a younger James Randi, or maybe a very Penn and Teller did a thing where they were like, yeah, you could make this say anything basically if you just adjust the font size. But yeah, no, there's that mindset that is interesting. I mean, when you laud any book that highly, people are gonna try and find hidden messages in it, and especially since the book does. Again, I was raised Catholic, so I was never taught that the book of Revelation is a literal end of the world. It's always supposed to be an allegory. But I mean, there are people that are like, yeah, no, this is exactly what's happening. So they're looking for a hidden message when it's, I guess, not that hidden, but.
All depends on the fecundity of the human imagination.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, no, that's that. I like that. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Did that answer all your questions?
Yes, thank you.
All right, we have 3 people with their hands up. One who stepped away, but she hadn't asked a question before, but I'm going to go ahead and give, and then we'll stop. And I know this has been a long talk for you, so even if you're a professor.
Yeah, I'm a lecturer. I have 2 classes back to back, so this is okay so far.
All right. Jim Young.
I have entertained everything that you have said, and I'm trying to find a valid reason why religious dogma would not be conspiracy theory. And you brought up something about the big secret, and of course, it is official, the part of the official story that you cannot know the truth about God until you have a personal relationship with him. It's kind of circular, obviously. And so that's their key to denying that anybody can know what they know. And then the other thing is we have a wealth of opposition to the official story within the scientific community, within reality, within the free thought community, within critical thinking concepts. I mean, it's everywhere. To say that there's no opposition to the official story, or that they don't think that there's opposition to the, I don't get it. Where's the real objection to calling religious dogma conspiracy theory?
From my point of view here is that the differences between the religion and the religious belief system, right? Obviously, the religious group, right, the people that make up the group, they could be conspiratorial, and frequently they are, right? There's very few religions that don't have us versus them kind of mentality. There's very few that are that don't engage in some kind of persecution complex. And I think that the religious belief itself, I don't see where it contains the conspiracy theory aspect, because all of the beliefs are out in the open. Everything they're saying is flat out, but there's, with the exception of, I guess if they bring in the supernatural, like is it a Christian, the Church of Jesus Christ scientists, right? Christian science, the religion of Christian Science that believes that all reality is an illusion, and that the illusion is there, that only the true faithful can see through the illusion. Then I would say that's definitely a conspiracy theory religion, because there's not much difference between that and like David Icke's Matrix thing, right? It's like who's responsible for it. I think Icke's on aliens or dragons or the hell knows anymore. But in that case, it's definitely the case. But I don't think religion as a term is the same as a conspiracy theory. It's the same as conspiracy theory as a term, but religious groups can certainly act conspiratorial.
I'm not referring to the actors. I'm referring to the dogma itself. And, and not a single word religion. I'm referring to the dogma. The dogma is conspiratory, all of it.
I disagree, because I don't see anything in believing in Jesus as being a conspiracy theory, or believing in Muhammad or the Hindu gods as being necessarily conspiratorial, or being it's like a conspiracy theory in that it's unsupported. There's no evidence for it.
What would it take to convince you? What would it take? I want to ask you the same question I ask Christians. What would it take to convince you that Christian dogma or Muslim dogma is conspiratory in its nature?
We'd have to change the definition of the word conspiracy theory, right?
Well, I'm sure trying to get one that makes sense to me. I apologize to you. I've been here for an hour and a half, and I still am very much confused with this definition, if it can't include religious dogma.
I just don't think it does. I think they're two different things. I'm no friend of religion, but I just don't think I don't think it's conspiracy theory, and I don't think we need to call it a conspiracy theory to claim that it's not correct, or that it's untrue, or unproven rather.
Okay, thank you, Jim. James Shaw, sorry.
Sure, hi.
Hey.
I was curious about the, you had, I think, 3 prongs for the definition of conspiracy theory. I only remember 2 though, sorry.
Okay.
The conspiracy to suppress it and being unsupported evidence.
Yes.
And I was curious, firstly, if you could speak more about why having insufficient evidence is necessary for it to be conspiratorial. Because I imagine many conspiracy theorists think they have as much evidence as the average person does for thinking the world is round.
Sure.
And also, we've obviously seen that there's at least some room for disagreement on whether or not things qualify as being suppressed. I'm wondering if you found problematic corner cases with this insufficient evidence prong. If
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So your first question was why the inadequate evidence is a part of the definition. And that's to separate out conspiracy theories from historical events which have conspiracies in them. Right. So the philosopher that's written the most on the subject, he wrote, where is his book? I'm trying to look at his name is Dentith, Matthew Dentith. His definition of conspiracy theory is any explanation which has a conspiracy as the salient cause. And that definition is problematic because when we say conspiracy theory, we usually mean something that's not true, right? And his definition would put in the same vein, or sorry, as on equal footing, right? The Osama bin Laden explanation of 9/11 and the Jewish space laser explanation of 9/11, which, wait, no, okay, it wasn't a Jewish space, it was just a space laser. I'm sure there's a Jewish version of it. But it would put both of those on the same footing because they're both conspiracies, right? There's the conspiracy in both cases, right? As I said, like the bin Laden explanation, it was a conspiracy. He got funding from people we don't know who it was, the Saudi Arabians. And so according to the 9/11 Commission, right? And he secretly funded a bunch of people to go to flight school in your state and to crash planes into buildings, right? That's one. No one. If you disagree that there was a conspiracy if you disagree that was a conspiracy, I think we need to redefine, or we need to consult the definition of the word conspiracy, right? It's a secret. People got together and they hid their actions, and then they did it. People who could get together and they're going to rob a bank, right? That's also a conspiracy. But I don't think we want to put the term conspiracy and conspiracy theory on equal footing, because we want historical examples. We want the recognition that a historical example of an event like the 9/11 is supported, whereas the conspiracy theory isn't. When you say conspiracy theory, it's a loaded term, right? It has all this baggage with it. And I want to make it clear in any definition of the term that the evidence isn't there for that claim, right? The evidence isn't there for that explanation. Okay, that was the first question. The second, what was your second question? Oh, I'm sorry, was that good enough? I'm sorry, did I answer?
That was good. That was great. Thank you. And for my second question, if I can swap it out.
Right. I lost your volume.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. For something like, say, the sinking of the Lusitania, which was a conspiracy. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Yeah, which was a conspiracy theory for a very long time, right? That the British were smuggling arms. And then it turned out they were, right? They eventually admitted to that. Would you retroactively say that people were not holding a conspiracy theory when they believed that?
Yeah, so this is one of the more interesting problems with the theory. Very early on, within days of the people who the Watergate burglars, like when they got caught, very, very early on, people were like, well, Nixon's responsible for it. But they had no evidence of that, right? When people who were very upset that Trump had won the election started saying, well, the Russians had something to do with it, right? For a lot of us, we had no evidence of that. It was just kind of like, I want this to explain the bad thing that I don't like. And there is a 4-dimensional problem, right? A time problem that, yeah, at first it is a conspiracy theory, right? And in some cases, you begin investigations, you begin inquiries with a conspiracy, like, I don't know if this is true or not. So yeah, and then you have to retroactively say, well, yeah, it's no longer a conspiracy theory, right? The Lusitania is a very good example, right? For we had denied that we were sending weapons to England or that they were however it was working. Like that was the Lend-Lease, that was not it, right? The Kaiser, did they take an ad out in the New York Times? Don't get on this ship, we will sink it. Military weapons are coming from New York to England. We will sink your ship if you sail this thing. And you do have to go back. I mean, as a skeptic, it's new information should change our minds. Hey, guess what? It wasn't a conspiracy theory anymore. I was wrong, right? That's the hard thing to say. The thing I don't like in like the psychological research on conspiracy theories is their definitions always have false in it. They'll always say like, it's an alternate explanation that is false. It's like, it's a lot harder to change your mind on something you claimed was false rather than saying unsupported. I think that's I feel like that's why, well, I mean, I know that's why I have unsupported in my definition, because it's easier, like, oh, well, now there's support. So, hey, guess what? You're right. And I have hard problems, admitting that I was wrong too, but it happens so frequently, so infrequently. You said that the wrong way. But yeah, no, I think you're right. There is it's a weird thing, because what's true is always true. And it's whether we're aware of it or not.
I'm not sure that what's true is always true, but that's another thing.
Well, facts of the world.
Yeah. Okay.
Facts of the world are true or false.
Yes.
Ethics change.
Ethics.
Right? I should have been clear. Yeah. Facts of the world are always true.
Linda Faulkner.
She vanished. There she is.
Hello, you got me now, or?
Yes,
yeah.
we got you.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Cult, conspiracy, religion. It seems to me that it might start as a conspiracy, move into a cult, and then move into a religion as it becomes more socially accepted. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is something we were just talking about this in my class on Thursday. Was this one student, she's a little annoying about it, but she wants to talk about the difference between a cult and religion all the time. And I honestly don't know what the difference is other than what you just said, which is social acceptance. Like time, I guess, is the big difference.
Where does conspiracy fit into that?
I don't know if it necessarily has to. Like the QAnon thing is behaving like a cult now. Like we know this. They have a dog. I guess if your conspiracy theory develops dogma, like you have to believe in certain tenets in order to if you're QAnon, that one's too big. All right. If you're an Illuminati conspiracy theorist, you have to believe in these, this set of beliefs, or else you're not one of us. But I think then it's, you start towing the line between cult and conspiracy theory, but it's also like the movement, the behavior of the followers too. So maybe eventually it does become that way. I don't know if there's a necessary connection, because you have a lot of people, like there's so many believers in the Kennedy assassination conspiracy theories that it actually makes history books now. But those people who believe in it aren't directed to do anything. Right? There's no action other than like writing FOIA requests, but there's no like QAnon people have to vote a certain way. They tend to act just they go to all these parades and stuff, and I don't know where the difference happens. That might be outside my field of expertise, actually.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. These are all very good questions.
Gus,
I'm used to teaching freshman college kids.
Gus, you get the last question. Sorry, Michael. It's almost 7 o'clock, and we told him he would be through at 7. So
Thank you. I've been watching some Russian television propaganda lately in conjunction with the Ukrainian conflict. And one of the things I find them saying repeatedly is that they are fighting a war against Satan. They think Zelensky is a Satanist and all his European partners are Satanists. Would you call Satanism a conspiracy theory since it's not been proven that Satan exists?
I think the use of Satan is a nice tool of conspiracy theorists because they have like the arch enemy everywhere. This form of Satanism is, it's like the you could swap out the Satanism for Illuminati, for the Jewish, the Zionist, the Elders of Zion, for the Trilateral. It seems to be a placeholder that as long as you have religion, you have a religious belief that goes along with it, it's easy. I mean, they're doing that to demonize their opponents, right? To dehumanize them, which is something that they, militaries always try and do. It's like, oh yeah, they're the tools of evil. You're not just fighting. You're not just invading a country and fighting soldiers. You're fighting like the very worst people who ever lived. Like these are monsters. Linsky's a Satanist. I hadn't heard that one in particular, but it doesn't surprise me. So yeah, I think their use of it is to posit like this overarching force in the world that is, real Satanism are just, they're pose, right? They're gadflies in the religious world. Like, yeah, okay, we're doing a virtual abortion clinic or whatever they're doing now. But like their view of Satanism is definitely indicative of them is definitely indicative of them, using a conspiracy theory model to motivate people. I think, yeah. That's all I've said. That's all I have on that subject.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gus. I wanted one quick question before we
Sure.
put this down. Do you think things like birds aren't real helps or hurts the effort to educate?
Oh God. Yeah. I think it hurts because people just started buying into it.
Yeah.
Right. And the guy who created it has been called a CIA shill because he's like, no, man, I made it up to make fun of you. Like, no, because I've been researching this since the 50s. There's an older, well, not an older conspiracy, mid-90s, so I guess older. Bill Cooper. He's like one of the founders of like the right-wing conspiracy movement. And he used to be a UFOlogist, and he was in the Navy, and he would talk about all the UFO stuff. And one time somebody brought up to him the krill, they're called the krill papers. And he's like, oh yeah, I saw those in the 50s, or I saw those in the 1962 when I was in the Navy. And like, no, we made them up last week, man. You couldn't have. And it's like, birds aren't real is kind of an example of like how I get what he was going for, but I think what that eventually did tell us is that there's no conspiracy theory you can make up that won't be too ridiculous for someone else to believe it.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I got too.
I think that's an important lesson we needed, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time, and
yes,
it's been wonderful. It's been very informative and educational. I thank everybody for coming.
Yes, thank you.
If you are pleased with our programs, please tap the like button and then subscribe to our channel. Don't forget the bell so you don't miss any notices of new material. We usually post new content every week. See our created playlists to discover events thus far this year, or to see a list of topics and speakers from our rapidly growing and diverse collection since 1992.